Hello everybody, welcome back. This is the second video in a series of videos where I teach iTalki teachers about basic grammar, where I try to give you the tools that you will need to be successful with your students on iTalki. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 different types of nouns or distinctions between different types of nouns, and I really hope that this will just be a foundation, a good start to your time teaching grammar on iTalki. Let's talk about nouns. I'm going to talk about some different kinds of nouns so you could easily categorize them. I'm going to walk you through specific activities that you could use with your students and talk about how we could apply these different kinds of nouns to specific parts of our curriculum. And if I leave anything out or forget anything here, you could catch up with me in my part 2 of nouns in this grammar series. Otherwise, I guess I did everything perfectly and we're good to go. The first distinction that I'd like to talk about is the distinction between proper nouns and common nouns. The main difference you'll see is that proper nouns are commonly capitalized, whereas common nouns aren't. Proper nouns are the names of or specific titles of things most of the time. For example, names, locations, places, events. We could use them with organizations, businesses. See, we capitalize these most of the time. Common nouns, they're just the generic names for things, right? So could be bottles, cups, light. But if we have a specific name of a particular place or location, for example, if we call an arena light arena or bottle arena, I don't know why you'd do that. Well, in that case, we would actually capitalize bottle or light as well. Sometimes, however, a noun could be a proper noun or a common noun, depending on how you use it. For example, if I say, "Do you know where Dad is?" then we would actually capitalize that. However, if you're using a noun and it's not replacing a name, "How old is your dad?" then in that case, we wouldn't capitalize it. So try these out with your students and maybe give them a text where all of the nouns are lowercase and they have to capitalize them. This would be great for beginner level students. Of course, proper nouns could be taught when you're talking about tourism and also when you're talking about business. For higher level students, do kind of what I did and maybe get them to find a common noun and transform it into a proper noun, either by making it the name of a sports team or the name of like a stadium, for example. For me, I haven't run into too many situations where I need to distinguish between proper nouns and common nouns with my iTalki students, because a lot of them are intermediate level students, but this is definitely something to be aware of. Okay, the second distinction, this is going to be the most important for you if you teach the same kind of students that I have taught, and those are the difference between uncountable nouns and countable nouns. How much money do you have? How many dollars does that cost? Like if you're a native speaker, this may be one of the things that have come potentially the most naturally to you. In fact, I don't even remember learning this in class. In grammar class, perhaps I did, but I don't even remember. We just categorize by intuition countable nouns here and uncountable nouns there. So what are the differences? Well, just like the name suggests, countable nouns could be counted. Uncountable nouns can't be counted. For example, information, advice, news. We can't say I heard 3 news yesterday, or I got 2 informations. Depending on if something is a countable or uncountable noun, that's going to dictate whether we use the quantifier some, for example, or a few. How much money do you have? I have some money. How many dollars do you have? I have a few dollars. So there is this uniformity between the 2 different kinds of nouns, countable and uncountable. But I could tell you right here, this might be the greatest Achilles heel that your students have. I actually shared a link with you down in the box below with some very common uncountable nouns. I've looked at a few links, and this is the link I think with the most common uncountable nouns. And as you can see in this link, they have different ways to kind of categorize these uncountable nouns. A lot of uncountable nouns relate to abstract ideas like advice, chaos, motivation. Liquids, milk, water, powder or grain, mass nouns. So this will at least help you to kind of categorize for your students the nouns, but actually this should also help you as a teacher. What could we pair teaching uncountable nouns with? Which topics? Well, we see feelings here, so we could definitely pair it with feelings or emotions. We could pair it with the environment, as we see things about gas and about mass nouns. We could pair it with food. So those are 3 topics right there you could have in your curriculum where your grammar focus could be uncountable versus countable nouns. And you could integrate different quantifiers such as a few or some. And another thing that you could do is focus on noun-verb agreement. Uncountable nouns, because they're uncountable, we don't use are with them. We would use is. For example, this information is useful. All of this information. On the other hand, countable nouns, you would use are, right? So for example, all of these papers are dirty. What's the trick with countable and uncountable nouns? It's just about remembering them. It's about remembering the list. But luckily there are some very high frequency words that I go over with my students that I see students making mistakes with often. And I know it doesn't sound like this is lucky. Why do we consider that a good thing? Well, if we're able to indicate patterns of challenges that our students have, just like strengths that our students have, it makes it easier to diagnose these issues and to actually work on them. Another thing I do in my classes, which you could definitely do in your classes, are teaching not only vocabulary and grammar rules, but also strategies to get around them. So let's think about uncountable nouns, common uncountable nouns, like information, advice, or news. Well, how do we kind of make them countable? How do we collect them so that we could say 1, 2, 3 informations? Well, one common word we use is piece. Oh, I heard a few pieces of information, 2 pieces of information, 2 pieces of news, or with news, you could use articles. I read 3 news articles. Advice, you could use pieces of advice. We could also use types, kinds, examples. And when we go into food or drink, for example, we could say pieces of meat, cups of water, grains of salt. And sometimes they're super specific, like kernels of popcorn. So again, this is a really useful strategy for your students to learn. Keep in mind that sometimes a noun could be countable or uncountable, and I'll leave a list with those nouns in the box below. For example, work. I would say I have a lot of work, meaning I have a lot to do for my job. However, if we're talking about an artist, we could have a look at their works. Or if we're talking about a researcher, we could read through their works. Yeah, so in this situation, works are kind of like publications. There are many activities we could frame around countable and uncountable nouns. A lot of this will be you just kind of finding your way as a teacher and seeing which activities work best for you. You could give them a recipe and maybe have them go through, and you could ask them questions about how much sugar has to go in the recipe, how many eggs have to go in the recipe, right? And kind of distinguishing through those. And then they could ask you and formulate similar questions. Another kind of noun that I would like to talk about is collective nouns. Collective nouns are nouns that represent a group of things. So for example, a group, a team, a family, a class. It could be a little bit difficult to decide whether to use singular or plural with collective nouns. For example, the family is or the family are. Usually it depends whether the family is doing something together as a group, as a team, or if they are doing things individually. For example, the family is watching TV together. The family have gone off to their own separate rooms. Collective nouns could be very fun to teach, especially with animals, for example. A swarm of bees or a pack of wolves. I'll post a link below with a group of terms that we use while grouping animals, and believe me, you will never run out of things to teach your advanced level students. Another distinction I'd like to make is the distinction between concrete nouns and abstract nouns. The reason why this is important is because when you're teaching students, especially students who are lower level, you're going to need to know what interests them. Young learners, children, tend to prefer tangible objects, concrete nouns. That's where they get their name from. They are things you could actually touch, such as food, animals, clothing. On the other hand, not always, but typically, abstract nouns could be more useful to adult learners and higher level learners. Communication, surprise, happiness. So for abstract versus concrete nouns, that's basically all there is to it. One of them you could touch, the other ones are usually ideas. But I think this will be good, especially if you're teaching children or if you're teaching adults exclusively, or if you have kind of a mix between the two. This will hopefully help you to categorize your vocabulary lists. Okay, and the fifth and final thing that I'd like to talk about today are compound nouns. Compound nouns are perfect for your advanced level students. They are two or more words that come together and they form one single unit, which represents a noun. So we could combine two nouns, basketball, and make basketball. You could actually combine a noun and a verb, like snowfall. You could combine a noun and an adjective, lime green. There are endless lists of compound nouns. We use them every day. And there are very good ways to test your advanced level students and upper intermediate level students. I'll post a link below with some different examples of compound nouns as a way to enhance your students' vocabulary. And maybe you could even learn something as an English teacher. All right, so those are the 5 things I wanted to speak about today. Hopefully that was either a refresher for most of you or it was informative and now you're excited to add this to your curriculum, bring it into the class, and when your students have questions about it, you will be there to answer them. Have I left anything out? If so, throw it in the box below. From my experience, these will be the most important things that you will need as an iTalki teacher, and this will help you to be more professional and confident on the platform. So if you're feeling confident with nouns, then hop on over to video number 3 where I'm going to be talking about verbs. As always, thank you for watching and keep smiling.